Today I'll be demonstrating how to attach a knit band to a garment opening, working in the round with a serger. First off, what is a band? A band is a long, narrow strip of fabric that's been folded in half lengthwise with the wrong sides together, so the right sides of the fabric are on the outside and the raw edges are matched up. A band can be attached with a regular machine too, but the Serger's overlock stitch works well for knit bands because the stitch stretches. I'll be using a 3-thread overlock stitch today. I prefer the 3-thread stitch because it has a little better stretch than a 4-thread stitch. And it's also narrower. Here's a 4-thread stitch. Here's the 3-thread. So 3-thread's always going to be a little narrower, and that makes it less bulky. But you could use a 4-thread overlock stitch, which is stronger. Either way, using a serger ensures a clean look inside your garment, prevents the fabric from fraying, regardless of which stitch you choose. So bands are used to finish the edges of t-shirts often, like this one. Here's one I did. This t-shirt neckband has also been cover stitched for the top stitching, but this thin little strip here has been serged onto the shirt and then top stitched. That's the band. Here's another one. This one's a little harder to see because it's black on black, which was kind of the effect I was looking for. Just real clean with the serger and real smooth to do. Cuffs are taller but are also bands, and they can be attached using the exact same method I'll be showing here. So here's a cuff. Again, it's just folded, wrong sides together, raw edges matched up. So this goes for cuffs at the end of a shirt or jacket sleeves, or cuffs at the bottom of pants leg, knit pants leg, like jogger sweats, long underwear, or these PJ pants. So bands can also be used at the bottom of sweatshirts and jackets. Now, but a lined jacket would typically employ a little different construction method that I'll be showing here, because the lining can be used to hide the seam where the band or cuffs are attached. So here's a jacket with a band. This is the bottom edge of a jacket I made, and this is the band. It's hard to see the seam here, but it's attached here. The band is attached to the bottom of the jacket here with a seam, and here it is on the inside, but you won't see that seam. It's attached a little differently because it's attached to the lining, and that hides the seam. But other than that, bands are really, the method I'm going to show here is used for a lot of different bands and cuffs. Quick note about binding. Binding is another method used to finish raw fabric edge. The bottom edge of this jacket, as well as the cuffs, they're not cuffs, as well as the sleeve ends are bound. So instead of cuffs, I have a binding on the edge of these sleeves. And basically, binding involves wrapping a long, narrow strip of fabric around a raw edge. And there's many ways to apply binding, but bands are different than binding in that you'll be able to see the seam used to attach them on the inside of the garment. Unless, like I say, with the jacket, unless you had a lining in there. But with binding, you won't see that seam. It's encased inside there. It's encased in the fabric strip. So binding strips for knit garments, by the way, they're cut on the lengthwise grain, not on the bias. So it's not called bias binding when we're working with knits, it's just called binding. Okay, back to bands. A band to be applied to a garment opening is always going to be shorter than the part of the garment it's being attached to. With neck bands, the rule of thumb is that the band should be cut about 80% of the measurement of the opening. So if the opening is 10 inches all the way around, the band would be 8 inches. And that's the measurement at the place where the stitching, the needle will go. So the band, it really does vary. That 80% rule, it really varies depending on the garment and the fabric. The band will definitely be smaller than the opening though, always, and then it will be stretched to fit. So if the band for a knit shirt's cut the same size as the opening, or it's too close to that size, it'll kind of flop out like that. It won't tug in to the body when it's worn, and it doesn't look very good that way. So bands and cuffs are meant to snug in towards the body. On long sleeve shirts and jackets and knit pants, stretchy knit cuffs can serve to keep cool air out while still providing ease of movement and comfort. On children's clothes, cuffs can sometimes be cut extra long and folded up to allow for growing room. So it's a great technique to master. One important aspect of attaching a band or cuff is to make sure it's stretched evenly as it's attached to the opening. If you stretch it too aggressive in some places, like say I'm sewing along here and I stretch it way out, then you might cause a wrinkling or a pulling of the garment. And you could also end up with extra band and not enough shirt to put it to, connect it to. So another thing about the stretching is if you stretch the garment opening instead of the band, it can also cause that band to roll outward. So here's how to avoid that. When you're attaching a neckband, you first need to divide it into 4 parts of equal lengths. This is called quartering the band. And then you divide the neck opening into 4 equal parts. And you mark each of these points with your favorite marker. I use these Freon pens, Frixon, I don't know what they are. For lighter fabrics, I tend to use, it's just a plain old soap chip. For darker fabrics, it always comes off. So I always, when I'm marking my points on my band, you're going to mark your band and the garment, I always start the seam is 1 point, okay, and then you just fold it in half like that. I've already marked this one, and then so that's my halfway point here. And then if you line up those 2 points that you've already marked, or the seam and the point you marked, then you have the quarter point here. On the shirt itself, some people would mistakenly think, oh, you got center front, center back, and each shoulder seam, but look at this t-shirt shape. Almost all shirts are going to have a little scoop there in front. Typically, I mean not always, but typically. So this measurement is greater than this measurement. So the way you can deal with that, what I like to do is I put my seam center back when I attach my band. So the center front is truly the halfway point, but then to find the quarter points, I match up the center front and the center back, and I walk that along, so I find out that the quarter point is actually going to be right here, about 1 inch shy of the shoulder seam on this particular shirt. So you have to do the math, or do the measurements, hold it up and walk the fabric edges like that to establish those quarter points. So those quarter points, you could also mark them with pins. Sometimes some people do that. I don't like to have pins with my serger because it's risky if you hit them, although I will pin, but I'll pin way far out of the way of the blades when I'm serging. Pins can also tend to fall out, especially when you're dealing with flimsy knit fabrics. So that's why I like to use the marker. So the quarter marks are going to give you a target to aim for and will help you stretch the neckband evenly as it's attached to that opening. You'll see what I mean by that when we go to the machine. Now cuffs are more forgiving when it comes to keeping the fabric evenly distributed as you stretch it. So I don't bother quartering those. I just give them a little test stretch, and I look at the bottom, I look at the bottom of the leg or the sleeve or whatever, and I just kind of pull it and say, okay, that cuff isn't that much smaller than the fabric. I'm not going to have to stretch it very much. But you could at least mark the half point, especially if it's a larger cuff. And I find it pretty easy to keep the fabric evenly distributed, so I don't quarter them. As I said at the start, the method I'm